Breathing was already wrong. Not the shallow rattle you expect near the end. Not the long, slow pauses that signal the body giving up. This was something else. Wet, deliberate, like someone trying to pull air through a throat that no longer belonged to them. It came from the direction of the bed, even though the mattress was empty, even though the sheets had been stripped, even though I had zipped the bag myself, less than an hour earlier. I stood frozen in the doorway of 412, one hand still on the light switch I hadn't dared flip yet. Then, the call light clicked. Not the soft chime from the hallway console, the actual button on the remote. A single, crisp, mechanical click, followed by the red indicator glowing steady in the middle of the bare mattress like a small, unblinking eye. On this channel, horror stories are told in a fully cinematic, audio-first way, so you never have to look at the screen to feel the fear. You are listening to Mr. Nightfear, where the darkness doesn't end when the story does. I want you to picture 4 East the way it feels at 3 in the morning when the rest of the hospital has gone quiet, except for the low drone of the ventilation system and the occasional faraway beep of a distant monitor. The hallway lights are dimmed to half. Shadows pool under the crash carts. Every door is closed except the ones where someone is actively dying or actively fighting not to. That was my world for 4 years. Room 412 was never quiet, not because the patient was loud, though he often was, but because the call light never stopped. Every 20-30 minutes, sometimes less. A short buzz, then the red light flashing on the console, then his voice crackling through the speaker before anyone even reached the doorway. "Nurse, nurse, the pillow's wrong. Nurse, my catheter feels pinched. Nurse, I think the IV is backing up. Nurse." His name was Harold Garrow, retired construction foreman, 78, end-stage heart failure layered on top of COPD and a lifetime of 2-pack-a-day Lucky Strikes. He wasn't confused. He wasn't delirious. He was simply terrified of being alone when it happened. So he kept us there, one at a time, like sentries. We tolerated it, because that's what night shift does. You absorb the fear of other people until your own starts to feel like background noise. He passed at 3:42 in the morning, on a Tuesday in late October. No drama, no last words, just the monitor flattening into a single long tone, the rapid little compressions of chest rising and falling simply, stopping. I was primary that night. I called it. I filled out the paperwork. I prepared the body. When we moved him to the morgue cart, I remember noticing how surprisingly heavy a person becomes once life leaves, not because of weight, but because there is no longer any unconscious resistance, no tiny adjustments, no breath to lighten the load, just mass. I tagged his right great toe myself, the white plastic tag with the black ink, name, date of birth, medical record number, time of death. I pulled it snug, not cruelly, just firmly, the way you're taught so it doesn't slip off during transport. Then the elevator doors closed and I went back upstairs alone to finish cleaning the room. I wiped the mattress with hospital-grade disinfectant. The sharp chemical smell cut through the lingering odor of unwashed skin and lavender talc he always insisted on. I coiled the call light cord, clipped the remote neatly to the headboard rail, turned off the overhead light, pulled the door almost shut behind me. The hallway was empty. At 4:42 exactly, 1 hour later to the minute, the console at the station gave its familiar 2-tone chime. Room 412, normal call. My charge nurse stared at the screen like it had personally insulted her. "That's impossible," she whispered. "You cleared it." I already knew I was going back. The hallway seemed longer this time. Each step felt like pushing through cooler, thicker air, the kind of cold that doesn't come from temperature, but from something else leaving the space.
I pushed the door open. Dark. Empty. But the call light remote was no longer clipped to the headboard. It lay perfectly centered on the bare mattress. Cord stretched straight in both directions, like someone had pulled it taut from the middle of the bed. I stood there listening. Nothing. Then, click. The red button depressed itself. Not fast, not violent. Slow. Deliberate. The way a finger with very little strength behind it would press. I yanked the cord from the wall jack. The entire unit went dead in my hand. 5 minutes later, the console lit up again. Room 412, staff assist. That code is different. It only triggers when someone presses the large red emergency button mounted on the wall inside the room. Not the remote. The wall plate, 4 feet off the ground, designed for a standing person to slam in an emergency. No one was in that room. I walked back anyway. The air inside 412 had changed, thicker. It smelled faintly of old lavender, and something sharper underneath, like burnt wiring or ozone after lightning. I reached for the wall button to prove to myself it hadn't been pressed. Before my fingers touched the plastic, a voice scraped out of the darkness from the direction of the bathroom. Low, wet, effortful. "Nurse." A long pause, the sound of air being pulled through ruined lungs. "You tied the tag?" "Too tight." I didn't scream. I didn't run. I simply stopped breathing for several seconds, because the bathroom door was open only 6 inches, and the darkness inside it was absolute. And because the voice wasn't coming from the bathroom at all. It was coming from the center of the empty mattress behind me, exactly where the call light lay. I never went back into 412 after that shift. They reassigned the room, deep cleaned it, changed the call system wiring. Nothing helped. The chimes kept coming, sometimes at 4:42 on the dot, sometimes at odd hours when no one was even looking at the console. Always the same pattern. Normal call. Then staff assist. Then silence. Until the next night, nurse walked the hallway alone. I still work nights. Different wing now. Different hospital even. But every time I hear a call light buzz, any call light, anywhere, my hand automatically goes to my right great toe and presses, just for a second, as if checking that nothing is tied there. Because sometimes I still wonder, not whether he's really gone, but whether drawing that line was ever enough, whether the tag was ever meant to keep him in or to keep something else from following him out. Sleep lightly tonight, and if you ever hear a call light in an empty room, don't answer it. Good night. Second story. The breathing started again. Not the labored, gurgling end-stage kind you'd expect from a dying man. This was slower, almost thoughtful, like someone savoring each inhale after being denied it for too long. It came from the center of the bare mattress in room 412, even though the bed had been stripped hours earlier, even though the body had been wheeled away, even though I'd felt the final stillness settle under my hands. I was standing just inside the doorway, the hallway light at my back throwing a long shadow across the empty floor. The call light remote lay dead center on the mattress, cord pulled straight in both directions, like it had been tugged by hands that didn't want to be seen. Click. The red button sank slowly, deliberately. Not a glitch, not a short. Something pressing it down with the last bit of strength it had left. On this channel, horror stories are told in a fully cinematic, audio-first way, so you never have to look at the screen to feel the fear. You are listening to Mr. Nightfear, where the darkness doesn't end when the story does. Let me take you back to 4 East, the way it really felt around 3 in the morning. The lights were dim to that sickly yellow hospitals use to pretend they're not keeping people awake. The ventilation hummed low and constant, like distant breathing you could never quite place. Every so often, a monitor would give its soft, double beep from down the hall. Then silence again. Doors stayed mostly closed.
The place felt watchful. Room 412 belonged to Harold Garrow for almost 3 months. Retired foreman. Built half the bridges in the county back when men still did that kind of work with their hands and their tempers. He came in with heart failure that had been winning for years, layered over lungs blackened by decades of cigarettes and construction dust. He wasn't senile. He wasn't even particularly mean, just scared in the way only someone who spent a lifetime barking orders can be scared when the orders stop working. He hated being alone. So he called. Constantly. The light would flash on the console, the speaker would crackle, and there he'd be. "Nurse?" The sheets wrinkled. "Nurse? My back needs adjusting." "Nurse? I think the oxygen's too low, nurse." We answered every time because that's what you do. You stand there, fix the imaginary problem, listen to him talk about bridges he built and men he outworked, and hope he doesn't notice how close the end is creeping. Sometimes he'd keep you there 20 minutes, sometimes an hour. He figured if someone was in the room, breathing, talking, alive, death would have to wait its turn. He died quietly on a Tuesday at 3:42 in the morning. No code, no family rushing in. Just the monitor flattening into one long tone that seemed to stretch forever until someone finally silenced it. I pronounced him. I did the post-mortem care. I zipped the bag. I helped lift him onto the cart. His body was heavier than it should have been, the way the dead always are. No resistance left, just pure weight. I tied the toe tag myself. White plastic, black ink, name, date of birth, medical record number, time of death, 3:42. I pulled it snug, not viciously, just securely, the way every older nurse had shown me when I was new. You draw the line. You separate the living from what's left behind. Superstition, maybe, but we all did it. I whispered, "Goodbye, Mr. Garrow," as the elevator doors closed on the morgue cart. Then I rode back up alone to finish the room. Disinfectant. Fresh linens folded away. Call light cord coiled and clipped to the headboard rail. Lights off. Door pulled almost shut. The hallway was quiet. At 4:42, 1 hour later exactly, the console chimed. Room 412. Normal call. My charge nurse looked at the screen like it had lied to her face. "You cleared that room," she said quietly. I already knew I had to go back. The corridor felt thicker this time, cooler. Each step dragged like walking through water that didn't want to let go. I pushed the door open. Dark. Empty. The remote was no longer clipped to the rail. It sat perfectly centered on the bare mattress. Cord stretched taut in both directions, as though something had crawled to the middle and pulled. I stood there, listening. Nothing at first. Then click. The button depressed itself. Slow. Almost gentle. The red light glowed steady. I yanked the cord from the wall. The unit went silent in my hand. 5 minutes later, the console lit again. Room 412, staff assist. That's not a normal call. That's the big red wall button, the emergency one. 4 feet up, designed so a nurse or aide can slam it with their palm when seconds matter. It requires someone standing there, in the room, pressing it. I walked back alone. The air inside 412 had thickened. It smelled of old lavender talc, and underneath it something electrical, like wires burning behind plaster. I reached toward the wall plate. Before my fingers brushed the plastic, a voice dragged itself out of the dark, from the direction of the empty bathroom. "Nurse." A wet pause, air scraping through lungs that shouldn't still be moving. "You tied the tag. Too tight." The words hung there. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just felt the cold settle deeper into my bones, the kind that doesn't come from temperature, because the bathroom door was only open a crack. And the voice wasn't really coming from there. It was coming from behind me. from the center of the mattress, where the call light lay. I left nursing 6 weeks later. No dramatic resignation, no big scene. I just stopped picking up shifts. Told them family reasons. They didn't push. I moved 2 states away. Found a small commercial kitchen for rent above a strip mall. Learned to knead dough at 4 in the morning when the world is still dark and quiet. The ovens hum steady. The timers tick predictably. Nothing moves on its own. Nothing whispers from empty corners. I make bread now. Sourdough mostly. People say it's good. Has soul, they tell me. I smile and thank them and never mention that I started baking because yeast is alive in a way that's loud and obvious. You can see it rise. You can smell it working. Nothing hides. But sometimes, when the shop is empty and the ovens are cooling, I catch myself listening. Not for footsteps, for breathing, for that slow, deliberate inhale that doesn't belong to anyone living. And when the timer buzzes, sharp, mechanical, insistent, I flinch. Because part of me still expects the console to chime. Part of me still expects to hear, "Nurse." I don't answer call lights anymore. I don't go near hospitals if I can help it. And if you ever find yourself on night shift in a quiet wing and a light flashes from an empty room, turn it off, walk away. And whatever you do, don't draw the line too tight. You might be the one who ends up tied. Good night.
Third story. The breathing came first. Not the mechanical hiss of a ventilator, not the wet rattle of failing lungs under heavy sedation. This was slower, deeper, human almost. Like someone standing just behind your shoulder, inhaling through a mouth that had been closed for too long. It wasn't loud. It was close. And it was coming from the far corner of the pod, where no one had been for hours. I was in full PPE at 2:30 in the morning, face shield fogging slightly with every exhale, the N95 tight against my skin, gloves already damp from sweat inside. The ICU we'd taken over was the old pediatric unit, bright primary colors on the walls half hidden now under plastic sheeting and extra monitors. Everything felt wrong, too quiet in the wrong places, too echoey in others. The alarms we knew, the infusion pumps, the vent high-pressure warnings, the SpO2 drops, those were familiar, comforting even. This alarm wasn't one of them. A single, steady tone, not urgent, not frantic, just persistent, like a doorbell no one was answering. My colleague, let's call her Sarah, checked our patient first. Still deeply sedated, still stable, chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm with the machine. No change. We started moving, slow, methodical. Down the short corridor of curtained bays, past empty cribs and toddler beds that hadn't held a child in months. The sound seemed to shift, now from the left, now from behind the nurse's station desk. We split up without saying it. She went one way, I went the other. Footsteps muffled by the paper booties we all wore. A couple of minutes in, Sarah's voice cut through the low hum of the unit. "I think I've got it." I walked over. She was standing beside one of the unused bed spaces at the far end, curtain half drawn, lights off. A call bell cord dangled from the wall mount, but the alarm was coming from the button itself. She reached out, pressed the reset. Nothing. The tone kept going. "Estates?" she said quietly. "Faulty switch, maybe?" Then her hand froze mid-air. The cord wasn't just dangling. It had been torn clean out of the wall plate. Plastic splintered, wires exposed. The kind of damage that takes real force. Not a tug, a yank. And the alarm only stops when she pushes the torn end back into the socket. Click, and the tone dies instantly. We both stood there. No one had been near that bed space. Not staff, not a wandering patient, not even a visitor. There were none allowed. The section had been empty since we converted the unit. Just monitors waiting to be used.
just silence waiting to be broken. The hairs on the back of my neck didn't just stand up. They felt like they were trying to crawl away. We didn't talk about it much after that. We finished the shift. We handed over. We decontaminated. We went home. But the rest of those hours I kept turning my head, kept listening for footsteps that weren't there, kept expecting the breathing to start again. A few nights later, I met a friend, another nurse, different hospital but same city, for dinner. Normal conversation at first. Then she leaned in, voice low, like she was telling a secret she wasn't sure she believed herself. I had the strangest shift in the pediatric ICU the other night, during the peak. You know how quiet it gets around 3. She described it piece by piece. Footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. Pacing behind the curtains where no one was assigned. She'd spin around. Nothing. Just empty bays. Heavy breathing. Not a patient, not a vent leak. Just close. Too close. Cupboard doors banging open and shut in storage alcoves she knew were locked. Drawers sliding out on their own. She laughed it off at first. Told herself exhaustion. Told herself the building settling. But at the end of the shift, when she went to use the fire exit to doff her PPE, standard procedure, she glanced left. Every single bed space storage cabinet, every drawer, wide open, contents untouched, but pulled out just enough to look deliberate, like someone had been searching or showing her they'd been there. She stood frozen in the doorway. Then she closed them all, one by one, quietly. Never said a word to the day staff coming on. After she finished telling me, we both sat in silence for a long minute. The restaurant noise felt far away. I never went back into that converted pediatric section alone. Not once. Even when I had to cross through it to reach the main corridor, I'd wait for someone else to walk with me, or I'd take the long way around. The breathing never came back. The alarm never sounded again. But the memory of it did. That slow, thoughtful inhale. That torn cord. Those open drawers. I left ICU not long after. Different reasons on paper. Burnout. Hours. The usual. But part of it was that unit. Part of it was knowing that in the places we try hardest to keep life going, full PPE, machines breathing for people, alarms for every possible failure, something else can still move through. Quiet. Uninvited. Not dying. Not living either. Just present. If you ever work nights in a repurposed ward, especially one meant for children, and you hear something that doesn't match the usual symphony of beeps and hisses, check your patient. Check your colleague. Then check the corners. Because sometimes the alarm isn't warning you about equipment. Sometimes it's warning you that something already found its way in, and it's not in a hurry to leave.